John, we're putting Dax next to you.
Excellent.
Are you bringing samples?
We don't have a lot left, but
Here's good, here's good. I'll convert Ken by the end of the night. He's gonna say, I can't let Mike eat all those. I can't let Mike eat all those.
So nice. Alcohol white.
Can't go to Costco to buy it.
Carlos gave it to me.
We got a
hero,
key.
Johnny.
We got a key on ours. I'm not quite sure what that opens, but.
All right.
Did they steal that from my office? You stole it from my office.
Wait, it says, what does it say? Oh,
We have like
key to success.
Yes.
200 of
They
them.
stole it.
you want
They
one?
stole it.
I have one, you can have two.
Yeah, we got some suit.
Oh, good
Yeah.
to know.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 6 o'clock, March 4th, 2020. I would like to call to order this special board meeting, a facilities workshop. Want to thank everyone in attendance. Want to thank those in the audience as well. I will turn this over to Chris to do a facilities presentation.
Thank you very much. Just for flow, I just want to share with the board, we have some things outlined that we're going to be sharing with you. We're going to have a discussion with you about portables for 2020 and 2021. We'll turn it over to Jeanette for a conversation on the K-3 class size reduction grant to speak about that. And then we're hoping that Dax will be here by then. He's going to be about 15 minutes late. He'll open up and share some of the documentation that we've been able to upload for him. And then we'll turn it back over to Jeanette for funding options and the conversation about potential bonds. So we would like to first start off with the portable conversation. If we can open up that document. I'm going to turn it over to Pete in a second, but I just wanted to give the board just a context on the conversation that we had last at the board meeting, and we were talking about different options that we had actually placed in the agenda at that time. And I also shared with the board an email that was sent to me by an administrator in our district, and that individual was sharing their needs as well and their requests regarding their specific school site as it relates to students being back in their wing on their campus. What I would share with the board is that we do listen to individuals here in our district, so I wanted to share that with you. I think that's very important that we listen to all parties. It's important for us to listen to constituents and stakeholders as well. But I think one of the things I've always shared with the board is I'm held accountable for progress towards the ends. We also have a very specific vision that's aligned to the ends. So as I share with you this opening statement, it's just important for us to remember that although we're being respectful and listening to individuals, it's very important that we all remember to be back on track for this is the vision. We're going to do best for kids. And I think at the end of the day, at the end of this presentation, I'll come back and just share with you how we'll move forward and what we're going to be presenting to you Monday during the regular board agenda as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Pete.
All right, we'll jump right in. I just wanted to share a couple of visuals, some frameworks that I think it's important that the board, for some of you will be review and for others it will be new information. But this continuous improvement cycle is something that we ask our leaders to think about. And when you think about facilities, what's the ideal state? It might be that a bond is put before the community and it's passed and they move into it. But we know that's a few years down the road, right? It doesn't mean we're not always thinking about the system. What's the next best move? And when you engage in that kind of work continuously, leading people through those changes and through what you're suggesting, it's the challenge of leadership. So like Dr. Hirsch just shared, we try to be mindful of the stakeholders in our system, and so I want to share with you a little bit about the strategy we're recommending. And when we talk about strategy, we often think about it in this way. Again, it's this vision for the system, but also on the other end are all these small details that have to get figured out by the folks that are asked to do the work. And so we've been asked to identify a particular outcome for facilities as it relates to portables, and this is just how we do business. This is how we've been doing business for the last We're year 4 now. When you are asking folks to go through a complex change, and this one I wanted to share with you because I want you to put yourself in the place of someone working in that preschool program right now. And if you look at sort of that resistance row, the 4th one down, what's missing there is incentive. Like, what's in it for me to move out of this fine facility at McFarland and go out to portables? And it's important that the leaders, certainly Jennifer Garza and others of us who work with those folks, help them understand why it might be the best thing for the system. Might not feel great for them, but is it the best thing for the system? And at some point, pending the board's direction, we'll have to go out and communicate that. But this is a way that we communicate with our leaders about how do you get messages out to folks? How do you get them to accept the change and move forward? So I wanted to share that framework with you because I know it's new for some of you. The next slide is really a way that we go through decision making. And so we try to think about, in this particular instance, what does McFarland really want and need? What does DOHS want and need? You were asked to consider that at the last facility meeting. What do the pre-K folks want, right? Being able to empathize with all of the stakeholders and trying to take their wants and desires and consider them as you work towards solutions. And then we define, like, what's the most efficient thing? What's fiscally responsible? What can each school tolerate, and what's sort of the feeling in the room? So once you get through that process, you get folks together who are not going to stifle ideas. And oftentimes it can be, when you're close to the problem, it can be difficult to not want to shut things down. And so you get a group of thinkers together to say, hey, what do you think about these ideas? And you come up with potential solutions. You prototype them, and those were shared with you. And we shared a DOHS option, MMS, K6 option, and almost after those prototypes are built, you begin to test them. You test them with the board. Hey, what do y'all think about these ideas? You test them with the people that work in those sites. You test them with the superintendent. You test them with leadership teams. And so we've gone through that process the last several weeks, trying to decide what's the best option for the system. So in the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about why we're recommending what we are. This idea about operational efficiency. There are more students coming to McFarland next year. In 7 and 8, we have a large group that's moving up, and that's going to be their new normal. We also are increasing staff at the site based on that. And there's some program changes coming to the middle school that we've asked Jessica Schenk to lead. And she's taken groups of teachers and counselors down to some really innovative schools. And they're bringing those ideas back, and they need facilities to implement them most effectively. They've also visited some schools in Washington State looking for more sort of local impact and trying to bring those ideas back to that site as well. So MMS is in a spot where they can do some innovative things and continue to keep things moving at that site. If we're able to vacate that wing and find a placement for the pre-K program, this is how MMS, it's sort of their initial draft about what they would do with those classroom spaces. There's no teacher names attached to it, but certainly programs. The new pieces that you see here are, they have some creative ideas they're looking at to serve our ELL students, and also some ideas they have around social emotional learning, that one additional space in this configuration, at least for a year or two, they would have that sort of flexible spaces, I think how you would identify in a school. So this idea about the system and efficiency, if you think about the preschool up here, how would you identify the preschool in this visual? Where do you think they're at?
With what they're
Which shape?
accomplishing right now,
Yeah, what shape are they?
they're the round.
Right, they got that ball moving. They got things moving. And, but those other blocks, what I appreciate about those visuals, those can be other sites, other programs. And so the preschool folks are pushing really hard, the ball's rolling, we got some momentum. There are other folks in our system pushing hard as well. And what can we do operationally and with facilities to give them some momentum? And then do we think, if we ask the pre-K folks, hey, we're gonna change that ball a little bit, we're gonna put a little speed bump in front of you, a little hill, are they gonna be able to get over it? And if we put them out in portables, we feel like they are. They're gonna be able to handle that. And is it worth the cost of giving MMS some more space to allow them to get rolling a little faster? That's how we're thinking about the work, and I think that's why that visual is helpful. And so then we consider what's the, not the, you know, the financial impact, but we're considering what's the cost to the pre-K program. We know they're gonna have the same number of spaces if we allow them to use that. What we call the wrestling room at McFarland. They're gonna have a very similar square footage, and they do have smaller class sizes and smaller students than McFarland, and so they might be more comfortable in those portables. There's also the benefit of constant supervision for those young ones. So we've put together 4 mock-ups, I think, maybe it's three or four mock-ups of where they could possibly go. Certainly these are just, there's a lot of logistical pieces here that we would work through with Greg. He's done some of the early legwork to talk about what the city might require, how much it might cost to do some of the infrastructure work. And we've put together 4 viable options, and I know the next move, if portables are approved, is to sit down with Jennifer and her team and really think through how do we deliver the best service we can and the best setup. But we wanted the board to be able to visualize it, so we've put together 4 options. One, right out on the football field where they were before, certainly an option. The next one is a little sort of compound. Again, McFarland would lose use of that formal football field, but there's some advantages to having that space, and we would want to talk with Jennifer and her team about that. The next one is a little bit further east, out where McFarland students currently come on to catch the bus. We've done some initial measuring about what the impact would be on that baseball field, and certainly in this configuration we'd be just fine. And then in the next configuration, we do kind of we tighten up a little bit on that baseball field, but we're still at an acceptable distance. We think, at least based on our initial measurements, that we would be okay in that sort of setup. But again, Greg, once a decision's made about whether or not we're gonna purchase or lease or move forward with portables, that's where the thinking is right now. That's where we're headed with the process.
Can I ask you a question on the?
Absolutely.
Okay, so will you then move your football field down? Or
If
would
you,
move
if
your
you,
baseball field
so,
down, or?
yeah, go to the football field one. What the district has already done, I think it's the one just above. There's already a temporary field that's been put in place, just below, what is identified as Ash Street there.
Okay.
So we have goalposts out there. We've been doing that a couple of years now. So yeah, there's a field in place. We could make it work. It's been working for the last couple of years.
And that's the space where those prior, or the ones that are there right now, the 2 portables are right here in this space, right?
In which space?
Right here, where you're showing.
There's
the front.
currently no portables
There's
on the
not.
They're
football
behind
field
it? Are they
this
over here
year.
then?
They're in that
They're on the
parking lot
parking
next
lot.
to it.
They're in
Oh,
the
parking lot.
top left of the image, yeah.
That's why they're dry, huh?
Yeah. In each of the scenarios, those 2 portables would go away.
It would get moved to OHS.
OHS.
What's the, because they're dry, that's right, okay. I was saying, what's the cost of just adding 3 and using those 2 without making them moving, but it doesn't work.
Well, they have restrooms in them, they just were never plumbed.
They could be made wet.
They can be made wet.
They're also, they're continued, if we purchase 3 and have the 5 here now, we still need 2 at
Yeah.
OHS.
I just didn't know the price of having them move them is pretty expensive.
It's, yeah, whether we move them on the football, like 20 feet, or move them to the high school,
Same
it's
price.
about the same price.
Yeah.
The cost isn't the actual moving, it's getting,
Loading?
it's the skirting, the utilities, the truck, you know, manpower.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys saw, they just craned some in over at Inspire Us this week. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Or by Inspire sometime.
I was wondering how they were gonna put those in, because they put them like right next to their foundation. I'm like, the crane does it, huh?
They brought a crane them into place. That's a modular building.
Any other questions from the board on this topic? If not, this is the recommendation that we will be bringing to the board on Monday. And at this time, we'll turn it over to you, Jeanette, for a class size reduction.
Well, before we move on, I do, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but let's
Yeah.
assume that this proposal or this option is agreed upon. Will pre-K have some say as to what they rather for the configuration and placement of them?
Yes.
Yeah, I think Jennifer and I have had some initial discussions, and she's done some careful thinking about what it would mean to the program. It seems like they've been thinking about this at their site, and so they're gonna bring some questions to the table, and it'll be sort of balancing out what are the pros and cons of where it might go. So certainly wanna hear from them about what would be the best configuration.
Thank you.
I have a question. So the approval of these 5 portables comes out of what fund? Is that out of our $5 million kitty? Is that out of money that the school district has for capital? Like what?
It would depend on if we're gonna lease or purchase them. So a purchase would come out of the capital projects fund, which would come out of that $5 million. Leases are generally operating budget items.
Okay, what's your vision with these? Is this like a short term, we're thinking like 3 years, or, cause I know if we're gonna lease, I wanna do what makes the most sense financially, and it seems like if we're just using these temporarily, like this is just like we need it
3-year
somewhere
plan.
for a hot minute,
Mm-hmm.
then it makes sense to lease. If this is like gonna be the new look of our district to where, I guess my question is, let's say in a perfect world, we're able to move on to the next phase of our bond, we're able to build an elementary school, will we still have need for these 5 portables?
Mm-hmm.
Will they be absorbed somewhere else, used during construction, or will these be like, well, we used them for the 3 years, now let's sell them, or whatever?
Yeah, I believe our initial conversations were leasing, doing a 3-year lease, and then at the end of that term, kind of evaluate where we're at in that facilities planning process, and then extending if we need to.
Do you have any cost ideas for what it would take to lease them for 3 years versus what it would take to buy them outright?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
That's typically been part of the recommendations.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be in the recommendation.
Okay.
And it should be pretty close to what we had last week.
Yes.
Yeah,
At the last meeting.
There was
yeah,
a
those
a
figures
lease
have been
versus
presented.
purchase
Yes.
number there.
I just had only seen it for 4 portables, so I was just curious as to what the 5th would do to it.
Purchase and lease prices don't change with the number of portables you order, it changes with the term of the lease.
Okay.
So purchase price is the purchase price, but you can get a better lease quote if you're gonna lease it longer, obviously. Typically, we've done 3 years, so we got a price for a 3-year quote.
Okay.
I can send it to you, Lindsay. We have a 5 portable priced out
Okay.
too. Yep.
In the past, when you've leased portables, has that been advantageous? I'm just asking because I don't know, I haven't been on the board that long. Has that been something where you're like, oh yeah, the 3 years was adequate? Or dang, wished we would have purchased them because we ended up needing them? Any ideas?
We're hitting 3 years at Wahidas this year.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Those were the first ones leased.
and those aren't going anywhere anytime in the
No.
next, right, so.
Okay,
There's
so-
no lease to buy, right? You can't like take your lease payments and,
Turn them
Right.
towards the
Yes.
ownership?
I'm sure that they're willing to talk
Yeah.
about that, but how much they'd actually apply to it, who knows?
So if you look at the board meeting on February 24th, if you look at the bid portables, there is option 1 is leasing, and option 2, leasing 4. Option 2 is purchase versus lease of 5. So lease for 3 years, 5 portables is about $470,000. Purchase is $800,000. Just to have that number out there.
Plus
Thanks.
installation.
Plus installation.
On both of those numbers, right?
Yes.
Both of those numbers.
But
And
the number is the same whether it's purchased or leased. For
Installation.
installation.
Yeah,
Installation cost?
and then lease does not include cost to haul them away when we're done. There's an additional cost at the end that's
Plus a pickup fee?
unforeseen, pickup fee. It's charged when you get rid of them.
So now, so the situation we're in with Wahidas, where we've had them for 3 years, we need them for minimum 3 years more. Is that something you guys just continue, you roll out with your lease, like, okay, we're gonna lease these for 3 more, or do you go to an option to buy?
We're gonna have to call them and ask them,
What
give
are
us some
options?
pricing.
Oh, okay.
My recollection at that point was that the board gave direction that we were going to lease.
Yes.
Was, so I think
Mm-hmm.
we can take some direction from
Yep,
the
from the
board
board.
to say,
That,
We're
the
gonna
thinking at
purchase
that time was that if we leased, what was expressed to us was if we lease, we don't want them permanent, so we're gonna choose to lease and force us to look at permanent options.
Right.
The current delivery, on this bid, was 11,500 per portable. And so, of course, in 3 years, that number, of course, would go up. It's never gonna go down. And I would guess fairly equivalent. And that's all on that same document.
I believe the delivery cost was included in the
It's
total
included.
cost.
The number that that is quoted,
It's
the
quoted.
delivery price is included, so, but just what, Lindsay said, I thought, well, we have those exact bids, I wanna see what delivery cost is.
Yeah,
So-
so that doesn't include like installation, pulling utilities, doing the groundwork.
Doesn't-
It's
yeah, it doesn't-
literally just the
No.
driving the building
Driving.
and dropping it.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Jeanette?
So a follow-up on the K3 grant conversation. So there was a couple of questions from the board from the last meeting. And if there's other questions, feel free to chime in. I think one of the big questions, was what costs can come from the grant. So any costs that, the district incurs as part of the process, so whether you have engineering or architecture or anything like that, they're all eligible for reimbursement. So, it's pretty flexible in that, so it's not specific to only contractor cost or only installation cost or anything like that. So, let's see, I think probably the next best thing to talk about is, a modular versus a portable. Cause they are two separate things, so, I think I'll have, Greg kinda talk about the specifics of what those specific differences are, as far as setup, as far as functionality, and as far as longevity of, those buildings and cost per square footage of those.
So the traditional portables that we've been leasing or purchasing, they're set up on block foundation, not a permanent foundation. So the main difference you're gonna see between modular and portable, when you use those terms, is modular is gonna be on a permanent foundation. It's gonna be a concrete poured stem wall foundation, set permanently for 20 to 30 years. No intention of moving it. Both the portables that we purchase now, they're considered a modular building also. We just don't treat them as such. Some other differences you can get into when you start talking modular is that's gonna be more of a custom design, multiple pieces, different configurations. You can get them in 8 classrooms, 10 classrooms, hallways. Cost doubles per square foot for those based on engineering costs, different requirements that come into play when you go to a bigger building or more rooms, like sprinklers or number of bathrooms or engineering for water hookup. So they are kind of the same, but the biggest difference is modular is going to be, if you're putting in a modular building, it's more of a permanent building and it's going to look more permanent. It's going to have some different features, maybe a little overhang over the front door, things like that.
And for grant purposes, it would have to be the modular, permanent or stationary for 30
Yes.
years or what have you.
Yes. Yeah, we have to certify it for 30 years, and it has to stay there.
I have a question about the grant money when you're ready for it. So just to clarify, let's say we're not gonna go to bond until November, but we have to have something moving by June. What would be considered moving by June to move forward with a bond in November, and then we probably wouldn't be able to break ground for, I don't know what construction time is for a school, I'm guessing 6 to 8 months minimum, full utilities, all that kind of stuff.
Closer to the year.
Yeah.
Closer to a year probably, it's 6 to 8 months for a home, so,
Probably closer to 18 months.
okay,
So the bottom line is by June, we need to be what they call in design phase. So if we're gonna move forward with a modular, we would be working with an architect. We would have selected a modular company and working with them on design, basically incurring costs that are eligible to be reimbursed.
okay. What if we're not going a modular route and we're gonna shoot for a bond and shoot for an elementary school, then what?
Probably start working with an architect, working on drawings, figuring out site, working on that.
Can that money go towards pulling utilities to land for the site of a school?
I believe so. Yeah,
So
it's
it can be
it's
part of any of the
building.
configuration of that elementary school?
It gets
Mhm.
thrown into the same pot of money you
Yeah.
would use to build the school.
Mhm.
Okay.
It wasn't really necessarily get designated as classroom money only.
Mhm.
Okay.
They're not gonna say that pipe's not for K3, that pipe's for.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Any other questions on K3?
Yeah, sorry, guys.
No, it's all right.
Do you feel like that's a feasible option? Just in your professional opinion, a feasible option that we could be moving forward with something by June? Whether it's, towards a modular or towards a school with a bond, like, do you think feasibility-wise, that's something that we can pull off between here and June to still capture that money?
I do. I think that the OSPI has been flexible enough, and if we're, like I said, if we're incurring cost and we're communicating with them and we're submitting for reimbursement, I think they will, fight the good fight with us and,
Okay.
Make sure that we have those funds. I'm not really anticipating a problem on that. They've been pretty receptive so far. I think OSPI is our friend, even though sometimes we don't feel like it.
Yeah.
But I think that they're pretty receptive, so I don't anticipate a problem with that. It's just gonna be timing, and which direction we wanna move, because if we move with building a school route, that process takes a little bit longer to get people on board, because you're talking bigger dollars, so you're talking different bid requirements for different, processes such as architecture, project management, those kinds of things, so that process takes a little bit longer, as opposed to moving forward with like a modular building.
Okay.
I wanna ask Greg that same question.
Say it again?
My feasibility question?
Yeah.
Feasibility question? I,
June
without,
deadlines.
without having land or bond money to put at your engineer, I don't know how much work they can actually do, other than we can say we've selected an engineer and we've begun conceptual drawings. Without the land to actually get some, get your fingers dirty in what you're gonna, your civil engineering can't happen, you could pick somewhat of a design, but your design's gonna be based on your land somewhat too. Where's the entrance, the exits? I mean, you could almost say you're gonna take Wahidas and copy and paste it, or flip flop it and copy and paste it or something, but it won't exactly come out that way, obviously, without. And then how much money are you gonna throw at that, hoping you get a bond passed? You could spend $50,000, $60,000, $100,000, and
I guess that's the question I have. If whatever route we decide to go, if we decide to go for a bond, and we're still trying to move forward with the state getting the K3 grant, and a bond fails, then what?
It's definitely gonna put a hiccup in the plans. I mean, it is somewhat putting the cart before the horse and kind of putting your eggs all in one basket, so it is a bit risky. I've seen districts do that, spend a whole bunch of money on architecture and trying to convince their communities to support them in a bond, and that bond fails and they have to eat the cost.
Okay.
I've seen
So
it.
we would not be reimbursed for our stuff if our bond fails.
If
We don't get the K3 grant.
I don't think we get reimbursement until the building's done.
Till the
Well,
classrooms
so,
are certified.
no, that, with the K through grant, yeah, that's, well, I know that they give money as you go, but I think on the final one they wait, if I recall correctly from the other district that I worked with. Like, that final claim is when they are like, okay, provide us all the paperwork.
Mhm.
So that might cause some problems, and like I said, I've seen districts that have put a bunch of time and effort and money, and unless you write it into the bond, you know, if you're spending above and beyond, that K3 grant, and you're not writing it into the bond and telling your taxpayers that, hey, we're gonna take some of the bond proceeds and use it to pay ourselves back, then you can't.
And these modulars aren't connected, like adding on an additional 5 or 6 or 4 rooms onto an existing building.
Yeah, they won't be connected to an existing building.
So it'd just be like a
It'll
fancy
be like it's
portable.
mini,
Yeah.
it'll be like a mini building.
Yeah, and that kind of defeats the purpose of actually adding on to the schools on an end where you can just add another whole wing onto them.
The downfall of just adding classrooms is our core space doesn't get any bigger, right? So your library doesn't get bigger, your gym doesn't get bigger, your lunchroom doesn't get bigger, so we're adding on classrooms and taxing the core space even more than it's already taxed. Unless I misunderstood,
Yes.
that's how it's
we don't
working
have
out in my brain.
Enough
Don't
room
have room to
anyway,
do that.
yeah.
Right, and we already don't have space.
Well, and depending on what the enrollment is, obviously, I mean, if we just basically swap portables for modular rooms or portables for, expansion, a wing expansion at a site, and we're just swapping one classroom for one classroom, then,
You don't have any room for growth. You'll be back to portables the next year.
yeah. But, I mean, the other thing the board needs to think about is the factor and where we're at with the state match on the elementary side. You know, we're pretty far away from that mark, and
Right.
do you wanna move further away from that mark?
Other questions for K3? Okay, that's, we have your documents out.
Okay.
Just an activity, just walk them through.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I was asked to take a look at the grade 9-12 situation, what it would take to maximize your state matching funds and eligibility. And so I came up with two models, one option that simply maximizes the state match, and that's a addition of 65,913 square feet. That's based on an analysis of 2019 enrollment. And that is not the previous target square footage to hit house the students for the next 8 to 10 years. So I ran a second option, which was to hit that program, which is the 91,375 square feet. So the primary difference is you have additional square feet to meet the program that was discussed several times over the years, and I believe addressed in previous bond, and that provided the new competition gym, locker rooms, auditorium space, some expansion of the core space, reconfiguration of the entry, potentially recall some of that, and additional classrooms. It also includes the elimination of the 600 wing classrooms and the 200, so your new and lewing, part of that 65,000 square feet includes the new and lieu space, taking down those older classrooms that are eligible for modernization and building new. So those were the two models, and
So the 91,000 square feet is basically the bond that failed, taking those numbers and reworking them to the maximum amount of money. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, and recalculating your state match
Okay,
eligibility changed.
Okay.
Went up actually from the previous version, so.
Okay, so this amount would be just the high school remodel? Or this,
Yes.
yes.
And this included an auditorium? I don't believe we discussed an auditorium. Prior bonds, but not this time.
No,
Well,
it was just the previous bond. He was reconfiguring.
he just went to the previous bond,
Just
which had
refigured
a
that.
1,500
We had-
square,
yeah.
1,500
Okay.
capacity auditorium.
yeah,
Okay, cause I looked at this and went, where did that number come from? Okay,
Which
that
one?
makes sense, the 91,000,
Yeah.
but that, okay, I understand.
that was the only work-through program we had from previous, what's needed at the high school to have it be
Okay.
viable for another.
So this
Okay.
this $15,000 number that we would be getting in state match and or K three
That's
I hope
funding.
it's million, I hope it's million.
15 million, my bad. In that case, it's only gonna cost us $53,000, let's do it. Okay, so this 15 million, part of that is the K3 grant.
No.
Okay, it says and or K3 grant funding.
On his original thing, that's one of his columns that he just sticks in there. So it's just state matching funds.
Oh, okay, so just state
Correct?
matching.
Correct. There's
Okay.
3 columns, total project costs, the matching funds projected, and the local costs associated with that
Okay, yeah.
project.
Okay,
So,
my bad.
depending on what you decide to do, you know, modular, portable, or new construction, in order to capture the K3 grant, this is outside of that. This was just the 9/12 analysis, so, you know, you can run that. I even have some various scenarios with the classrooms, you know, adding 10 here, but where are you gonna add them? Are you gonna add 4 here, 6 here? There's been a lot of discussion about where those would go and et cetera, so I didn't wanna confuse things, but that model could be built quickly, and if there was some discussion and some consensus on
Would it be more practical to go 2-story?
with this project.
Yeah.
Well, you obviously have a very
For classrooms.
constrained site, so yes, that would be a real possibility. It's not really gone down the road that far design-wise, but as you started to move through that process, it would be definitely something to look at. And we did do some preliminary layout on the site of how can you fit 91,000 square feet on that site? And we talked about vacating the road that bisects and try and optimize the use of that campus, but knowing it's small, so you're absolutely right. If we could go up with the building, that's going to allow you to maintain certain aspects of the site that,
Have you worked with districts who've done that? Built a second story on an existing structure?
No, I think they were referring to the
This is
new
new construction.
construction
New construction.
would have a
this is new
second story.
construction.
Oh.
Like
And we
600
wouldn't add on
feet.
top of the.
I know, I was thinking, I'm like, that sounds really expensive. When I actually thought about it.
So you take your 600 wing and build it up, right?
Right.
Pardon me?
You take the 600 wing and then you turn it into a 2-story. full of
And a
spaces.
whole lot more
Yeah,
everything else.
you'd scuttle the 600 wing and build new
Mhm.
with that eligibility. But whatever the program ended up being a competition gym or auditorium, classroom, course space expansion, whatever that combination ends up being, you would likely look to go vertical with it, you know, like a 2-story classroom wing or something, because your volume is there with the new competition gym and an auditorium, so roof lines, et cetera, it's fairly easy to complement. And in some Sometimes it's less cost to go two-story, sometimes it's more, depending on the situation. But, and, you know, you can modulate in between. It's not like you have to build 91,000. That was just the program that was developed for, you know, get you to a 1,500 student high school and projected 8 to 10 years where that would conserve, well, you're growing pretty quickly, so you could get there pretty quickly, but that's what the initial program, and we've carried that for several years, so. Probably if the high school was the focus of the bond, probably wanna engage an architectural firm and take it to the next level and try and define that program so you can, you know, clearly depict what the intent is and what the focus is and what would be associated with it, and then budgets can obviously be dialed in with that information.
So the 65,000 square feet is using the maximum amount of state match for what they would give us, and we wouldn't at that time be overhoused. Counting all the new and lieu and the state match for unhoused and all of that.
That's correct, based on 2019 enrollment figures, which is, it reverts back to the fall. And there is a 1066 special needs isolated 99-minute form that's filled out, which bolsters the area per student, so that, give or take, yeah, you're, yes.
Right. I'm not gonna keep you to like the square footage exactly.
Yeah, within 3 square feet.
Okay, great.
Non-eligible new construction would be considered the auditorium, a gym, a competition gym, stuff like that, course
Then-
space.
The non-eligible is the difference between, if you took the 91,000 and took away the 65 that's eligible, so the square footage delta between the 91 and the 65, so that square footage above 65 is all non-matchable square footage, so you end up with 2 categories running, so the 65 is matchable, the 65 to 91 is not eligible. So it doesn't matter specifically whether it's gym or auditorium or classroom or this or that.
Let's say we
I don't even care what we put in it. I mean,
Even if
because
it's
it's
vacated.
9-12 money into the state and it's K-8 money, whatever we end up putting in it. Heck, we sell it, whatever.
Yeah.
How long until the state takes that out of the 9-12 equation?
Need to look at it, but it looks like, you know, you can remove it from your inventory by resolution. And like you'd mentioned, the 5-year rule where it comes off your inventory, but it states it was, let's see if they're considering that. Improved space. So they're showing that 9,270 square feet of that facility was improved space. So they're recognizing that you improved that. It was built in 70, but purchased in 2012 and then remodeled and board accepted in 2013. So if it's improved space and funded by, they're still gonna consider that new. You just can't take it off, or you can remove it, but if it was OSBI funded, what do anyone recall, in 13? That was just done in small in-house project,
Yeah, I think that was all local dollars.
yeah.
From that $26 million bond, the original bond, and matching funds, I think, I don't know if it was, designated local dollar, it wouldn't have had matching funds for it though, I don't think.
Doesn't look like it. So 5 years, you could probably get it off your inventory.
Okay. Cause if it took us 4 years to build, basically, then we tried to take it off, by the time that the 9 years is up for the new modernization, if we're not over capacity then, and that, you said 9,000 square feet drops off, we could have like a perfect storm happening in 9 years that we're out of capacity again and we have a modernization eligible thing, maybe, or it could totally bite us in the butt.
No, I agree. I think it-
Also shows another 5,500 square feet on that campus, or
So there's two buildings, there's the gym and then the classrooms, so there's 5,000 for probably the gym,
Mhm.
9,000-ish for classroom space, so we're talking more like 14 to 15,000.
right?
Does it show the gym as
5,500
nine,
square.
12 space?
Yes.
Hmm.
Although it, how does it stated, 9,270 used for the high school and the rest for the district, is the way OSBI put it, so,
Cause it started out as a district conference center and now they use it, some portion of it, but,
The district uses this too.
yes, they do. There's a lot of district stuff in that space.
would you abandon it completely?
No.
Because, no?
Why would we ever ban anything completely?
Well-
I'm sure we'd stick something else there.
Well,
Or
if you
over
showed,
capacity everywhere.
yeah, so if you showed growth within the district and a need, sometimes you can do what they call it's kind of a gray area, but the one-time grade reconfiguration, so if you had a need on both the 912 and the K8, you might be able to unhouse that square footage and put it towards a project and convert it to K8, if you could sell why, the reasoning behind that. But when you try and find that, I've done it a couple of times where districts had rapid growth, or they were, like your situation, they would consider that a housing emergency at the high school currently, because per OSPI, and they don't usually cheat to the right, you're 65,000 or near 65, well, less the 600 wing, you're underhoused at the high school by 65,000 less the 600 wing, which is about 12, so 50.
Okay. So maybe we could transfer it into something else. Is what I just heard you say.
If that was a
A
mall, yeah, we could.
one-time transfer.
Yeah. The other, we discussed that previously with the high school, because the high school is such a condensed site and you bought all that new property. There was the idea that potentially a grade reconfiguration with the existing high school campus to a K8 and then build a new high school. That wasn't a viable option, because creating 200,000 square feet of new high school is well beyond your bonding capacity.
Okay.
So that's where it went back to the one campus, and knowing that you could put athletic fields at the new property and still have it available for a new K8 or at some point down the road, but that nature, but anyway, my point was that you're already showing, in a sense, a housing emergency at the 912 level. So,
Other questions for Dax? Janelle?
Now we get to continue talking about that. So I had Mark Pressing from ESD 112 and their financial advisory services group come up with some slides for some options and funding for us. This is just some general goals, meet the capital projects needs while also meeting the taxpayer expectations, promoting future tax rate stability as well, and then providing room in the tax rate structure for future funding needs. So these are some of the key inputs that we utilized. So we utilized a spring 2021 election date just to give some room for that. So basically what that would mean is if the bond is passed in the spring of 2021, collections wouldn't start until 2022. So the taxpayers wouldn't start paying until the next tax year. But if we ran a bond, the district would be able to collect the funds probably by the summer of 2021.
If it was a bond.
If it was a bond, yeah, we would be able to sell those bonds once it's passed. So we did a few different options. We ran a capital levy authority for $20 million. We also ran 4 different bond options. We ran a 20, a 30, a 40, and a 50 million. The 20 and 30 are on a 21-year term, and then the 40 and 50 are on a 25-year term. So basically we would be paying those back over those terms. Also built in is some assessed value growth, and the bonds being sold in multiple series to meet the construction cash flow, so we wouldn't be selling them all at once. We would do them in multiple phases. Also bond interest rates, obviously, and based on the current rates, and then payments being structured to keep that level tax projection. So that's something that's really important when you're looking at passing a bond.
So if you were to sell the bonds in multiple phases, let's say 10 million right off the bat, and then waited 3 years to do the next 10 million, if we were to do a $20 million whatever, $20 million bond, how does that work on the 21-year maximum term thing?
So the term applies to the sale of the bond. So if you sell 20 million or 10 million at a time, then the 21 years would start from that time, and then if you sold another 10 million, then you would have another 21 years after that one.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yes,
So it's from when you sell the bonds.
okay.
Um,
But could you change that number according to making them want to drop off at the same time, I guess?
You can change it. The thing that affects is basically the amount of our payments each month, or not each month, but each year. And so that's gonna affect the tax rate.
Collection rate.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
so
if
that might
we've
put a
been
spike in it.
approved for a $20 million bond and they start collecting for a $20 million bond, even if we haven't sold the $20 million bond,
Mhm.
then why would that change the collection rate?
So the way it works is we don't certify a collection rate at the time that we're doing the election. So we what the voters pass is a bond amount.
Okay,
So like with the M&O, like we just did, right? We certified a total dollar amount, but that was based on a dollar per thousand rate, right? In bond world, that dollar per thousand rate doesn't exist, really.
So
We
when,
have estimates,
okay,
but because you're looking at such a long term, there's not anything hard and fast. We look at it as on a year-to-year basis, and we look at, okay, what have assessed values done? What are we projecting? How much cash do we have in the bank from the prior collections, net the prior payments? So we really look at that on an annual basis. But when they're projecting out and they're doing these projections for us, their goal is that consistent tax rate for the taxpayers.
okay.
when you define your bond scope and develop the budget, so if it was the high school, I'll put together a detailed cash flow across all the project activities, and then that helps structure how to optimally,
When we need to sell bonds.
yeah, when you need to sell them cash flow wise, and
Okay.
sometimes it's optimal to sell it. If you have a low rate, sell them up front. If you were just doing the high school, you would, you have a good faith spend down of 85% within 3 years. That's another restriction. Although, if you prove that's your intent, you can show it in the schedule. And Jim McNeil, yeah, he requires this little package that I love to produce that to prove good faith that that is your intent. The ironic thing is there's no penalty if you don't. But at the time of the sale, it's
Pretty serious thing.
yeah, pretty serious thing, so, but the more detailed of a schedule and the more detailed of a cash flow model, cause you also have to show everything from projected interest earnings in it and your revenue stream of your state dollars coming back to you. So you see that whole cycle through the completion of the project. So with that, you can be pretty strategic about when and how you break it up and structure it. And as stated initially, it's your best guess of what the tax rate will be, but you don't know until you actually.
Yeah. The other thing with selling in multiple phases is now you're incurring multiple bond sale fees because people don't do that process for free. So you're looking at those stacking up as well.
Okay.
So I guess do we have any interest in reviewing the capital levy at this point?
Always.
Okay. You're not gonna like it, but okay.
I looked at it.
So this is a summary of the results basically. So a capital levy, we have a maximum of a 6-year term. So just in the 2021, if we pass in 2021, collections would start in 2022. So if you look at those red boxes in the capital levy column, right underneath those red boxes, you see a projected change of $2.06. So that would be what the tax rate increase would be for a $20 million capital levy over 6 years. And so that's, collecting the 20 million over the 6 years. So that's a, smaller cash flow each year. And then looking at the $20 million bond option, you're looking at a 74 cent tax rate increase, just based on the projections. $30 million would be $1.01. $40 million would be $1.06, and $50 million would be $1.45 per thousand.
So such a small change between the 30 million and the 40 million because of the term, changing from the 21 to
Yes.
the 25 years. That's
Yes.
what is the big key factor there.
Yes.
Okay? So when you say 2.06 and 1.1, 1.1 to what?
Dollars per thousand
Okay,
of assessed value.
because then you use the other examples below and I wasn't.
Yeah,
Sticking
that's
those
just an
together.
example of if a home was valued at $200,000, then that would be the projected cost per year for those measures. So there's a lot of other slides that kind of break that down further, that break down like projected tax rates and graphs and really tiny spreadsheets. But basically that slide with the summary of the results. So this is what the cash flow would look like basically on the bond project, or on the bond side. So all of that's provided to you guys as well, but that summary, is really that, kind of bare bones of what you guys were wanting to know, what the cost to the taxpayer would be.
Thank you.
And then decisions and next steps to work through. So a lot of it's what Dax was saying, of finalizing your project scope, engaging an architect, developing more detailed cash flows, working with bond council, community outreach, all that good stuff.
So, because so many people are getting their property taxes right now, from 2018 to 2019, it went down by over $1 per thousand. But we're still getting the same amount because of the change in the levy that the state did, in essence.
So, I guess what are you looking at? Are you looking at a slide, or are you just talking in general?
Well, pretty much all of the slides show the 4.22 change to 3.15.
Yes.
Change of $1.
Yes, that
But
was
because
that
the way,
was the state law change.
yes, but also because of the state law and because of the kind of community that we live in, we're still getting the same amount because the state's giving us more and we're paying less.
Locally, you're talking about the local M&O levy,
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
Yes.
and now EP&O levy, right.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Any other questions for Jeanette?
No, not for me.
Now, Mike, that concludes the district's portion of the presentation.
Okay, well, I am gonna ask one question, just because I'm dreaming big here and thinking totally outside the box. I'm gonna go back to, I think it's the 91,000 square foot proposal or whatever we have here. And if I'm at the top, I'm looking at 65,913 square feet, total cost of approximately $24 million. And then there's a new construction excess, whatever, there's another 9 million plus there with some escalation costs or what have you. And then I go back to the $50 million bond and the projected rates. Could a bond include 25 million for the 66,000 square foot portion at the high school? And if we acquired land, a 28 to 30 million pre-K 6 school? And this is the question's for the board. I mean, is that something that we would be interested in, or anyway, are those things possible? Could those things be?
If you took a target $50 million bond measure
I'm kind of wanting to start, okay, choose 50 million per se. I mean, we're dreaming here.
based on
Yeah,
doing 65,
uh-huh.
so.
And then
if
taking the
you're-
rest of that money, if we were able to purchase land and build,
26 million to.
and build a pre-K 6. I'm dreaming.
26 million to build a pre-K 6, I think is gonna be a little tight.
I thought we were like at 28 to 30 or something, I thought.
How much does it cost to build a current regular size K6, even K5? What do wahitas cost?
I think some of the most current one is in Tri-Cities. It's 28 classrooms for right around 27, 28 million, maybe, pretty close.
Probably, did that include a land acquiring and
No.
running utilities and
No.
all that fun stuff?
We have models though, I mean, in Richland alone, we've done 7 new elementaries, so we have a pretty good idea but I was just looking at it, so if you had, let's assume you end up with 25 million attributed and you're just maximizing your 912,
Mhm.
so 25 million local, so what,
And we could capture the entire 13.4 of the state match just with that 66,000 square foot portion of it, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, whether you do the 91
Yeah.
or the 65, you're gonna, for the most part, get that 15 million and change. There's only, the 65 is 15.6, almost 15.7 million. The 91 is slightly larger for, it's the same model, it's the same eligibility, but when you build a larger facility, the state matches construction testing services and a couple other items based on actuals. So the testing services is higher for a 91, so you're getting match on that, so that increases the state match. And there's other categories where they base it on total square foot versus eligible square foot. So that's why you have 15.8 for the 91 and 15.7, so.
And I guess
So
that was,
yes, you're maximizing it at 65.
okay.
And so if you took 25 million in local, what could you do with that? And if you did, you could do about 50,000 square feet potentially, new facility.
And what was the one that we had? How many square feet was it that, the one that we looked at to put out there? I know we had a number that was like between 28 and 32 or something.
The original bond? Or
No,
the
this-
15 bond?
Oh, the rough amount that we were.
The rough
looking
amount
at.
for a new pre-K out there
Yeah,
at
with
80 acres.
Yeah, with utilities and stuff, I think, yeah, we were throwing around 28 to 32.
That's probably a higher square footage, so
Yeah, we were looking at like a Wahidas plus another wing.
60.
Yeah, plus a pre-K wing.
Well, if we were able to build a school within a school at the high school and the DOHS opened up and we could put pre-K in DOHS and then reduce the size of our elementary school to where we could just copy Wahidas, copy that same square footage and didn't have to add the extra square footage for a preschool program. A, is that feasible for the preschool and the growth that we anticipate for the preschool program? And B, is that something we could, like Mike said, if we shot big and went for a $50 million bond, could we build Wahidas 2.0 and do the 65,000 square foot remodel at the high school? I know that's a lot, all at once.
And then turn Desert Oasis into preschool.
And then turn Desert Oasis into the preschool.
Sure.
Things are dreaming big with us, Dax.
It's all about the options that you want to put
What
in.
you'd wanna do is maximize the high school eligibility and phase the projects, be designed, and when because you end up in a cash flow, situation where that would be optimal, cause you could likely, if you had a $50 million bond, you could front fund the high school, so then you could bid it. You wouldn't be dependent on the release of the state matching funds. You could wait until that cycle, otherwise you're waiting until July of the year you're eligible for that money to come back to you, so.
So you pay for it all with bond funds.
Right.
And then we would do the reimbursement process once, cause there's a very driven process with that. They only do application approvals certain months in
July.
July.
A certain month, got
End
it.
of
loud and
July,
clear.
every year they go through the list, and historically, they fund most all the projects, well, they have for many years, but
As long as there's a capital budget.
there was one anomaly there that I don't think they
I don't think
really
we'll do that
understood
again.
the impact of that,
I
but
think we'll do that again.
Well, this is our discussion time here, guys.
Yeah.
Can I get thoughts of where we're at based on what we've seen? And these are just thoughts, I realize at this time. Everybody doesn't have to dream big like me.
The thoughts for me is I would like to see a $50 million bond. I would like to move forward with the high school and build a K-6. those are my thoughts moving forward. If we can afford a pre-K 6, I would love that. If we
And not
can't,
because you were looking at my notes, right? No.
I can't even read your handwriting.
All right.
I would say this, and I
Isn't his
didn't
handwriting in Spanish?
quite get there, but if you did the high school first and you front funded it,
Yeah,
that gives you optimal bidding schedule and timing of that, because the optimal thing is to bid it early in the spring, come out of the ground as the weather goes, and that gives you
Let me do the 65.
a 16-month. If you start in July, then you're almost definitely a 2-year wrap, but my point is, you could go through the design process with a pre-K 6, and depending on the market, if you just said, hey, we're gonna spend 50 million, you do a backwards budget, you do the high school, you maximize your state match, and then when you move to the elementary, you know, you're gonna build the core space for 65 to 70,000 square foot facility, and then you modulate back to what you can afford within the 50 million. So if it's 50, 55, it's pretty easy to develop alternates where you can expand and contract that facility within the dollars you have available.
so just so that I can be clear about what you're saying, you would build the core space to the size of school you want, and then put on a wing as you can afford it, kind
Well,
of classrooms?
yeah, you'd have your initial project within the 50 million, do the high school, capture the state match, move to the elementary or K-6 project, and let's say conservatively, you're getting 50,000 square feet. Well, the core space, you know, the admin, the gyms, the commons, cafeteria, that takes up a certain size, and if you attempt to, you know, scale that back,
That makes no sense. That was
Right.
no vision.
it creates problems if you wanna add on to it. So
Right.
you focus on building a core space that would support, you know, a student population that's larger than you're able to afford. So when you design the building, you have your classroom wings, but you likely have another master planned wing that you could go from 50 to 62 or 65,000 square feet already built into the plan that the core space will support. So,
You have that room for growth
Right.
if we get a big bubble or whatever, yeah.
right, so
And you have a provision for modular spaces.
Yes.
that too, you could be a module, you know, you can have,
Portables.
So when the
Portables.
preschool moves
you know, hard-built classroom
Right.
in the master plan, and then you have,
Hook them up to semi.
you know, portable pad locations if you just need to add a couple to keep yourself housed until such time that you could afford to do it, or OSBI funding or eligibility changes. And what I'm saying is, you could do both. It would just be a matter of modulating the second project back within the available funds.
Yeah.
And timing it
and-
and phasing it in.
And I could do a budget pretty quickly on what 50 million
Can get us.
can get you K-6 wise.
That's just me personally. That's where I'm at.
Well, it wouldn't be 50 million for the
Just
K-6.
50,000 square foot.
No, I'm saying, what a
What could
$50 million
50 million get us, period?
bond would get you high school and K-6 wise.
Yes.
In terms of the two options for the high school size, I'm much more on the 65 square feet, 65,000, over the 91. I'd be concerned about overbuilding, burdening our taxpayers very highly over, and then possibly shooting ourselves in the foot when we can redo other space. I just see that as dangerous. I mean, we need a lot of stuff at the high school.
Right.
Like you said, we're in a crisis mode. But, I'm afraid if we go above and beyond, then we're shooting ourselves in the foot with the taxpayers. I mean, I'd love to have all of those things that originally was discussed.
Right.
But maybe we can still build some of those things and then leave space for, this will become, we need to have a master plan there. We've never had a master plan. It's always like we need extra 6 classrooms here, and we need extra classrooms there, and it's, we have this space here, let's just chunk it there. We need to have a long range 5-10 year plan in terms of maybe student body size and not years, so that we have built that in. We've never had that. That I've seen.
The 1950s master plan
The 1950
Followed.
master plan was,
followed. Yeah, the original building was where the office is. That was the first building built, and the gym, and it had provision in there for the 600 wing, the senior hall, the BOAG was all on the original plan. And they intended to build those separate buildings, and they did.
and they kept building according to
So
the
we need to
1950s
be the
plan.
new 1950s. That's what we're.
Wow.
We need a
Oh,
2020
yes.
plan.
That's right.
Anything over 50 years is kind of dated.
50 years, huh?
Kidding me.
You must
All
only be
right.
49, man.
Yeah, we're only 70 years old now.
I'm glad I'm not dated. How about you?
That, my big concern is overtaxing the public, because they got the final say-so to this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
no matter how much, or how big we dream, you know, I'd love to have that, but it ultimately goes back to what we could sell the public on. And I don't wanna see this crash right now, because it's gonna be 2-3 years down the road again. We're gonna be back at this table again, trying to figure out what to do. So, and we're in a crisis mode now for the high school. We need to have something solid that we could get the community behind and set. I think by going the big numbers ain't that first step right now. I'm with Jen on the 61,000 feet for the high school, and working on a master plan, and working with the public on that master plan. I'm really in favor of trying to get the public's feedback on what they think that the school system should look like too. Whether we know the high school's first, but we also know that the elementary schools are just right there behind it too. And,
Jeanette, none of these, unless I don't see it, the projected tax rate slides, when does our current bond drop off?
It's the blue. The dark
Existing,
blue
okay, I'm sorry.
is the,
Yeah,
I didn't, you're
Yeah.
right, yes.
right.
so it's 2027.
So
27,
Ken,
7
following
years.
along your ideas, if we did the $30 million bond and we jumped up to 4.25, then in 6 years, it drops to 290.
290, and then
Do
we could
another,
start to work on
we could
the
do another
elementary.
bond, because that's really about the phase.
We could live
I'm
in
thinking
portables, I
that the
think, for
elementary,
another 4 to 5,
would
6
be
years if we
there.
had to, but it ain't that,
right,
it ain't the best thing, but for getting by with the.
and we need to get as
with
much
the
state match.
Yes,
I just think,
optimize that.
right.
as much
And
as
I'm not
possible.
saying that that's exactly what I'm not saying that's my decision, but I'm saying, you know, if you followed that idea,
Yeah.
So we would say in 2027, then we were gonna revisit the idea of building an elementary school, so that would put us to 2030 before we.
no, if we revisited that in 2026,
Yes.
so that by 2028, we can say, we're just replacing
You-
and keeping at the
You
same
could
rate.
start to visit that 2 years
'Cause it's
before the
really
bond
like
drops
2 years
off and-
before.
and get ready for it.
Yeah, you would
So
want.
as soon as it drops off, that you're right there with another one to
Right,
follow.
because
you
we've
would
already
wanna run
dropped
an
off.
election 27.
Right, we've already dropped off from 2018 to 2019, and that's when we were trying to get that bond in there to replace that number, so that we kept, that was what was kept being said. It's just gonna keep your tax rate the same. There's been a big change, or maybe it was not increase it as much as would have increased it because of that state change. So,
Can you remind me again, how big was our bond last time? Do you know what the dollar amount was we were asking for?
the last ask that failed?
Yes.
I don't know, 61.
Because
It
there's
was kind of a
65,000 square
two-stage.
feet.
It was a two-stage, because we were gonna
Yeah, I was
maximize our first sale of the bonds. Then as we were able to collect more, I think it was another,
Yeah,
No,
you would have
I
to
can't
phase
remember.
it in, cause you were probably at your debt
Yeah.
capacity.
It was right around 63, 6,
61.4 million.
61.
Okay,
61
so-
million.
Yeah, 61.4.
Cause it was, half of that was waiting for this one to drop off.
Mhm.
You can sell more than you can, you can get more approved than you can sell because you can wait to sell.
Yeah.
And that's, I know, part of that process,
Mhm.
but.
Okay, so bear with me while I'm muddling through this.
It's a whole new world.
And then maybe I'm misunderstanding. 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, when we went to bond, we were not as in an emergency state as we are now, and we were asking for 61 million. Now we're in a worse emergency state, but 50 million's too much? Is that, did something happen between then and now that changed the situation of our district that I don't know about?
People,
Anybody?
honestly,
I'm asking
I
them.
think
Yeah,
it's
I can
people.
answer that.
And
I
assessed
don't,
values.
I don't know.
The,
Dax maybe?
the previous bond, there was a focus on the K-8 on the new site, so building a new K-8 at 70,000 square feet and trying to address the high school needs, which were similar, you know, doing that 91,000 square foot addition at the high school. So the two of those, there was no combination, or that model puts you over your bonding capacity at that point, so you were going to be delayed for an extended period of time waiting for your bonding capacity to be present to capture or sell those bonds to do the second project. So, I don't remember what the delay was, but it was 5 or 10 years,
Yeah,
it was
5,
an
probably
extended
to 10
period,
years.
so you were gonna do the first project and have approval to sell additional bonds, but my reservation with that was you're so far out, you know, you're trying to build a budget,
Yeah.
who knows what the marketplace is gonna be at that time, it was a push. So, this, you know, anything, you know, $50 million bond addressing the high school need, and as you were talking about, you know, you don't wanna overburden the taxpayers, so you know, the bonds I've been a part of, that if you focus on and ask the question, what is the need? You know, sometimes the want's there too and blended, but really need, and that's what most community members that are on the, you know, fence, whether to support or not, it's like, well, you need it, and you need it for these reasons. The high school, it's pretty straightforward, and now you're seeing it evolve at the K-8 level too, but it's need, you know, what your need is, and,
I was
When
just
that
curious
bond
if
was
something had
put-
changed.
When that bond was put on the ballot, Mike is the only person that is still currently on the board. It came out the same time that I think Ken and I were on that ballot. So that vote was before Ken and I were on the board,
Okay.
and Sharon and Lindsay are even
Newer.
newer. So I think the change,
Has been
is
the board.
us.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if something had been built, if something had been reconfigured, if something had been changed to make it to where our needs have changed versus what we were asking for. That was my question.
I don't know if you can answer this. Do most cities go to their, or school districts go to their debt capacity maximum, or do they leave themselves with,
oh,
that concerns me is
they'll
that we have
usually leave
nothing
some
to fall back
for
on.
emergency
Yeah.
situations, but you do have what they call non-voted debt capacity, which is minimal, where you can actually acquire funds and through a non-voted debt, but it's the dollars that you can capture with that are maybe a couple million based on the valuation of the district. So,
That's really more like emergency,
yes.
you gotta have money now.
I mean, I think that's, we
You
have to
can't
leave
wait.
ourselves with a little space there instead of going all the way.
What is
Well,
our debt
that's where doing the
capacity?
multiple, that's where doing the
Yes.
multiple sales or phasing the sales in is
Don't
an
have that
advantage.
yet.
What is the debt capacity for Othello?
Right now it's about 54 million.
And so it was 61 3 years ago?
It was not, so that's where the phase in of the sales came in.
They would've waited to ask for more.
Yeah.
Until after this one off.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
so they would have asked and gotten
That's
approval
easy.
from the public for the full, but as far as actually selling and incurring the debt, it would have been phased in.
So in
Okay.
terms of putting that $54 million into dollar amount per thousand, can you convert that number so that we can understand that?
Well, it'll be close to that 50. If we do 54 million, it'll be really close to that 50. It'll be a
So
little bit higher.
$50 million one.
close to $4.70 per thousand, ish.
Total tax rate, yes.
For 6 years, and then it drops back off.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the total including the operating levy.
Dr. Hurst pulled up in 2021, what was it?
I think it was, 54 million,
Yeah.
yeah.
21, I think.
21, yeah, 21, what does it say?
58.
I think it's 58 million.
I don't know where I'm supposed to be looking for that answer.
The far left column, Jen, the far left column.
40, what year? What am I, I'm gonna pass this back to you.
It is 54
Yeah.
in 2020 and the projection.
And it's 58.8 in 2021.
Yeah, and
So-
as
so
assessed
if we
value
did
goes
take-
up, that
Right, so
will
if we
create
took, if we
stretch
took
too.
50, we would still have the cushion of $4 million in 2020 and $8 million in 2021, and that cushion would just continue to grow as time went on.
Yeah, as assessed
Right.
value grows and as we pay down the debts.
Can you tell us when, that thing that we keep looking at of the original bond
Mhm.
presentation, what meeting that was in, if we ever wanna go back and look at that?
Oh, that was,
Find out.
that was just on his computer, but I'll find it.
Okay. Cause we keep looking at that and it's,
We can send it to you.
would you slide those down that way?
As far as finding out what the public thinks, man, I've been asking everybody. I don't have a conversation with people in the public without asking them, so I would say, as a challenge to the board, get out there and ask the people what they think. People who have kids in school, people who don't. People in every age bracket, every race, every religion, all over town. I've been having conversations with people who are my friends, people who are not my friends, people who are my parents' age, people who are my age, people who are younger than me. I've been having conversations with everybody I see in town about what they want for our community and what they want for our school district. So just from the conversations I've had, I'm comfortable with going big. And I felt like the parents at our OHS visit and the staff asked us the same thing. Like, your job as the board is to provide us with some facilities, and what are you doing to step up for that? And like I said to them, our community's gonna have to show up in a big way. And in a big way, I mean like $50 million big way.
And that's my concern. And I look at the levy as kind of a good indicator. We were only asking the public for $1.50.
Mm-hmm.
That just barely got by at 61%. Granted, we only needed 50%, but that's the same voting public that's going to be voting if you go out and ask them for a $50 million bond. Now you're asking them for $50 or $60 million. We just got by at 61% on the levy. We need a 60% for that bond.
Yeah,
So that's the
Yeah, no
same
doubt.
public.
no doubt.
And that, to me, that's kind of a good indicator. We got a lot of work to do
Yeah.
in
we do
order
have a
to
lot of
get
work to
that.
do.
I
No
think,
doubt.
not totally, but a very big part, and this is just my opinion, of a non-pass last time on this bond were the letter K-8 in our promotion.
I've heard that in my conversations too.
I had several people say that they would not be in favor of anything.
Mhm.
And although I know that wasn't the majority of people, but I think that had something to do with it.
I do too.
I also think, I agree with you, Lindsay, in the part where, whether we like it or not, part of our job, I think, we're gonna have to sell this, and we're gonna have to sell the need. And I don't think it's out of the realm right now to say that the remodel at the high school for the 66,000 square feet to maximize state match and a new pre-K or a K-6 or whatever is needed.
Yeah.
It's needed. It's not like, we aren't asking for a Cadillac that we're gonna use 10 years from now. I think if these facilities 2 years from now were in existence, they would be getting used.
Absolutely.
I really do. And it would help with overcrowding. You asked earlier when we were talking about portables, are they here to stay or whatever? Marcus built a house, new addition over there on Road 68. I want to say it's Rosa something, STEM Elementary. Beautiful, 2-story, you come into it. But behind that, there's 6 portables. You know, so portables, they're seen as, you know, taboo or what have you. But even in a new construction, because that school I don't think is 5 years old,
It's not.
it's got 6 portables in the back of it. You don't see them when you drive up to it. There's a nice big 2-story section, the playground, the new, you
So they
know.
didn't do it like we did at Wahitas and just stuck them right out there in front? Let's just show everybody, there's portables here.
That just kind of came to my mind when you asked, you know, to me, that's part of the things I'm considering when I'm gonna decide if I'm gonna lease or buy. There's always gonna be a need for portables in this district, whether we like it or not, whether it's for construction, there's always gonna be a need for some. Maybe not 20 of them, like we have now, but there's always gonna be a need there. So, when I say dream big, it is a big ask, but I think if structured properly, if promoted properly, we could sell this need, because I think the need is there. I really don't think that we're trying to put the Cadillac one out there when we need the Nissan. I really don't think that's the case. And I think if we educate the community as to why we're asking for these things, I don't know, Ken, I'm not saying this is a fail-proof, but I really think that we need both of these scenarios. I mean, they're within the realm of possibility of asking. We've been challenged, you know, publicly.
Yeah.
We've been
Thanks, Lizzie.
told, you know, give us something to vote on. So, although, you know, this is not a decision for tonight, but my opinion would be that I don't think this is a real big ask. Yes, it is the highest one of the 3 that we've looked at as possible scenarios. But at the 470 on the 50 million is less than what it was when we went out for the 61.4 million. It's less money. I heard things of, the only reason I didn't vote for that bond is because you put a 1,500 seat auditorium out there. That's not needed. Had that not been on there, I'd have voted. Maybe that's some of the things we look at when we're putting this together. I mean, there's a lot of variables that went into this, but as far as needing these spaces, I think we're there.
I do too.
You know, I feel you, Ken.
Another need.
I feel you where it's a tough job and we need to be cognizant of, we're already asking our community for a lot of money. But if we want these things, and they say they do, some of them, I don't even want to say most of them, because, you know, most of them don't show up to our parent meetings or what have you, but the ones that do are saying this, and if we as a board, we as a district, do things the right way, and, you know, share the story of 100 kids leaving the assembly because they got nowhere to sit. You know, those things are gonna, they put us in a position where we don't have a choice but say, community, this is going on. We're not making this stuff up. So, as we're thinking about these things, you know, it's tough. Where's the line of trying to be cognizant of our taxpayers' funds, getting the most bang for the buck, addressing the needs at the same time? Our community's gonna have to help us out here in a big way. So, it's not an easy decision, but every meeting we have, we get more information.
Yeah.
Yes.
We get more stuff, but I think it's to the point, Jeanette, a bond resolution has to be in by for a November election?
August?
She suggested spring.
I would do it in the general
Okay.
election.
Yeah,
You don't want to do it.
well,
Because that's a presidential
So-
election, it's a higher.
yeah, you're gonna get a mixed bag. You're gonna get more people to show up. You're gonna get more
You don't like-
voters, but you're also gonna get more people who are maybe not such a fan of taxes.
Depending on who's
So it's
actually.
kind of a
but the-
gamble.
But
Those
the,
that
yeah,
show
the
up.
candidates for the president are projecting
Yeah,
tax-wise too.
it's kind of a gamble, but I mean.
I
you
thought
get
it
the
was,
tax
I
rate.
heard that was the best time to run one.
It was-
You get
it was,
statistically.
they did
Yeah.
say the best
That's
time
what I heard.
statistically
Yeah.
was
That
November.
It is the best statistically, cause you get that higher voter turnout. You get, I mean, people are gonna vote. That's the draw. You don't
So
have
our
to
job
work
is-
as hard on
wouldn't
that.
mind
So I
going
think
for
what we
big,
need to know.
But if we did go for big, I would have to have Plan B right behind it, because if it didn't go through,
Absolutely.
we don't
can
have
run
another
like
2 to 3
spring.
years to
We
kick
don't.
the can
No,
down
we
the road.
don't, right, and that's what we've
We gotta have
done.
something immediately
That's
Thank you.
what we've
Yeah.
taken, right. So I think that we need to know when we have to have a decision made
It's gonna be
for the
early
November
August.
election,
Early August.
August the fourth.
okay,
Okay.
and then the
Okay.
spring. The
Spring
spring
would-
dates as well.
Do you mean February?
I mean, the
Election?
spring dates, multiple dates,
Okay.
options in
So
spring.
February election would be the November.
Yep.
April election would be February.
Okay.
So
I think-
August, November, February.
I think we as a board need to possibly consider whether we decide to go for 50 or not, maybe still in our process of our decisions, is maybe we need to have a community facility. What are your thoughts? What are, that the board runs, you know, an open dialogue? Maybe we throw a few things up and we just talk about, here's a couple of different options. What do you guys think? Tell us what you
I
think.
think our policies even kind of require that,
Right.
to have the public
They
involved.
encourage us
And
to
so
do
I
that.
think that we need to be ready at our next meeting to be able to put together some dates so that we're getting a better feel.
Good,
whether
I
we
thought
go
I thought
November-
you wanted a plan by Monday, I'm like.
Oh, no. I'm not ready to do anything until the cranes are gone, I can tell you that right now. Please do not give me another meeting, until after that is gone. Just so that we can have like a plan, like, you know,
Yeah.
a go forward
I
with.
agree, I
Because
agree.
we still have a lot of smaller decisions that we need to be making
Sure.
before we even go to this, if we're doing a facility discussion, a community facility discussion. We still have lots.
Yeah.
Portables, we still have transportation, parking lot, we still have, I mean, I'm sure there's like another
There's several
10
there.
decisions before we even get to.
Well, and you need to
Storage,
build
Yes.
in that PR sell it time because
Yeah.
Yes.
it's a big push. You're
Yeah,
gonna
you have
have
to
I remember
to
last time it
engage.
was a
Form a
great
bond
plan.
committee.
Yeah, bond
But
committee.
we didn't have the yes campaign, absolutely right, Mike.
we did have like specific times of when
Yeah.
stuff went out, flyers went out, meetings were at.
Yep.
Did you say you did have a yes
We
campaign?
did not.
Okay. So that was one thing
It
that a
was all-
community member said to me,
Mhm.
was they didn't feel like there was a committee that was getting the word out to the public where there was like a yes campaign.
Correct.
It was district one.
Right. So a lot
we
of
couldn't do
community
that.
involvement is gonna be key in selling it to the community. But like Mike said, at least that's where I'm at, where I feel like we're not trying to sell the community on an auditorium or on things that are like an extra that would be amazing for our community, but that maybe we don't need. This $50 million is literally giving us our bare bones reconstruction at the high school and a new K-6, which we need bad. I mean, we're over capacity at every school, it's only gonna get worse. This is just our reality. So I don't have a problem trying to sell that to people, because I have people ask me, what are you going to do? What is your plan? How are you moving forward? And so, when we're moving forward with the bare bones, unfortunately, this has been neglected, not to anyone's fault, but it's just been a situation that's been neglected or hasn't moved forward for so many years that now we're in emergency mode of, we have to do something.
We're 5 years behind.
We're 5 years behind schedule.
Well, they already had the 20-year plan, which is not even hardly looked at, I don't believe.
For the high school?
No, that included a high school and included, it was a 20-year plan. They had, that committee met for like 2 years. They were,
Well, out of that 20-year plan, I bet we're on like year 7 and
Probably.
we're still at day 1.
and we still had
Of
another
the plan.
facility committee that we haven't followed through with that either, so, yeah.
Time to drop the 1950 master plan and regroup.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Dust
Yes.
it off.
And I totally think, I'm with you,
There's a lot of good notes on that.
We have to just use the maximum that we can get from the state funding
Mhm.
with the lowest amount to ask.
From the
What-
locals.
Yes,
What-
or we'll
what
be
can we
shut
do,
down.
though?
Pardon me?
What do you think, okay, so our maximum amount that we can ask, that we get for state match is like 15 million. So then if we only ask for 20 million, that gives us like 35 million. That will give us one or the other. We
This
can-
one, the district cost would be, it's still gonna cost 23 million out of pocket.
Right, so if we only ask the community for 23 million or 20 million, right? Our options are 20, 30, 40, 50. If we only ask for 20, we will have to choose either an elementary school or the high school remodel. What would you be in
You
favor
can only
of?
use the 15 million for high
You
school.
could.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
It's only the high
So
school.
you have to do the high
If you
school. So
go,
our-
if you go lowest amount, you're only doing high school.
Right, so we won't have an elementary school until we run another bond in, if we run another bond in 3 years, then we're 3 years past that from stepping foot in it, so we're 6 years away from a new elementary school.
You're probably looking at
Although,
20,
you
24.
could just say
High
we're going 100% local for a K-6
Yeah.
and,
Yeah, you could choose to do that.
and not do the high school. Just to say that, I'm not saying that's an option that I wanna discuss,
Right.
but anyways, you said that, so,
So it would be one or the other essentially.
yes.
Either we ask for 30 million from the community and just build an elementary, or we ask for 20 million from the community and just remodel the high school with the state match, or we ask for 50 and shoot for gold.
By the time
You
that
guys
we're
can
ready
go
to
above
do, by the time that we're ready to do the elementary, I mean, we're talking a few years down the road. We're not gonna do both immediately.
Right.
We're only doing one. By the time that we're a few years down the road, we might be able to have a state match on the elementary by that time anyways because of the capacity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
But
true.
it's gonna take us a while, just find a piece of ground, then
Yeah,
get it shovel ready too.
That too.
yeah.
And-
Well, you
and
wanna
that could be
target a
another
piece of
10
ground
million.
my preference would be to target a piece of ground before you commit to, we're gonna build 50,000 square feet of K6. Because as you can see with like the property you have, to get infrastructure there was, well,
Well,
you
that's
know,
not even an option anymore.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying the scenario
I
of,
prefaced my dream with if we had a piece of land.
Right,
Could I
But
share a
like-
couple comments?
yeah.
Of course. Help us, please.
I'm not sure it's gonna help, it might feel a little bit like a
You're gonna
pushback,
Make it.
but I think it's important to share the brief history. If the community had passed that bond and built a K-8, we wouldn't be here talking about these issues.
Right.
So I don't think it's fair to people who worked on this project really hard to say it was neglected.
I didn't mean to.
No, yeah,
I'm
I know,
sorry.
I know, but,
Not
and it wasn't just you, but those people listen, and a lot of people worked hard on it that still work for us. And if it was program, if people didn't like K-8, and they didn't like that part of it, that would have solved our facility problems. We would be here talking about something else, the high school, right? And so I just don't think it's fair for people to hear that messaging.
I apologize to whoever's
So do I.
listening. That was not at all my intent, and I sincerely, I apologize.
Yeah, no, and I'm,
I'm, you know, I've given kudos to everybody who's worked on something, but it was just comments that came to me.
yeah.
It was commented by a few people, and those, if you're listening, community, and I apologize. That was not at all my intent.
I just wanna make sure that those people know that you're all here thinking about it critically, and so were they.
Right,
They
right.
were working in much the same way.
Yeah.
The other piece that I think is so important we hear from the community, but it's also so important that our teachers and principals hear that we're listening, because if you just did the high school project, OHS wins, MMS is right-sized right now, it's 7-8, but those K-6 folks need to know what's coming next. And if it's 6 years away, they just kinda need to know that. Can they prep and prepare for that? So whatever the message is, whatever you all decide, I think it's really important that we wanna hear from the community, right, absolutely, but we need to hear from the teachers and the principals. They need to be part of the discussion as well, just so they can start to plan and do the hard jobs that they have. So I just don't want them to be left out of the conversation.
Definitely.
I think especially since they're already overloaded right now with students. Totally.
Yeah, they certainly feel the pinch. When Dax talks about program, that's what we think about, right? Those are who we're talking to every day. And if we tell them it's gonna be 3 more years, those people are pretty resilient. They're pretty tough. They'll figure it out, right? But if we say it could be 3 or it could be 13, that's harder to sell to them,
Yeah.
right? To do an already tough job.
And there are taxpayers too.
And
A
three.
lot of them.
Some of them,
three
yes, you're
well,
right.
3 of the elementaries, excuse me, okay, 3 of the elementaries, their kitchens are too small and they don't have that second gym. So those PE teachers are they're stressed too. I mean, and so it makes the whole entire schools. Yeah, that was the only thing is it's hard to pick. It's gonna be very hard.
Yeah, that's why yeah, it's
Yeah,
hard
I
to
mean-
say just OHS wins or just K6 wins when they both need the championship.
I mean, how did they
Yeah.
save so much money in years past to have built Wahidas with cash?
I'd let Dax answer that, but that has more to do with the way matching funds came down from the state rather, and our,
And
way
the
our
enrollment
cohort
growth.
was, and enrollment and growth and age of buildings all played into that. It was just the right time to do it.
'Cause you don't seem to
The
see
way it
that
is.
Yeah,
growth.
when we passed that original, that bond 10 years ago, and then had money left over to build Wahidas,
Yeah.
it
It was, we were able to set a pace with your growth in order where the original plan was still the $28.6 million bond, and the match was very low because it was being spread amongst the facilities, and the strategy when we came in was you focus on this school, you capture the state match, and you kind of see that with the high school. If you do the high school first, you're capturing that 15 million, and then you're rolling it in a sense. So if you pass a bond, let's just assume for the high school total project cost, and you generate that 15 million in state match, that rolled to the next project, which was also eligible, so that 15 million went into that and generated state match again. So it was all about the pace moving through those. So by the time we got to the end, we continually generated matching funds on each project in kind of a stair step. So in a sense, you're generating state match.
Because Wahidas wasn't the end of that that money.
Right.
We did Desert Oasis, we did
Yeah,
six-pack at the high school, we did offices at the high school, we
the
did,
co-op.
And that was all
Yeah.
the cash flow that you.
it was all the cash flow that came, and we did new ORTC co-op, you know, I mean, it's just,
Yeah, depends on costs that come in and things like that. And,
Right.
you know,
But-
construction costs back then are not construction costs.
No.
I know that even from just the 4 years of not doing that,
Yeah,
a K3 grant, it's gone up extremely,
yeah.
so.
Like was mentioned previously, you know, if the high school goes first and the K8 based or K6 project, but K8 based eligibility grows, you know, you look at that pace, there is an opportunity to maybe capture eligibility. If there is, then, you know, you might be able to bolster the square footage of the K6 if it's originally planned at 50. If you can do more square footage, you would take advantage of that. But
Do you guys remember what the last bond yes vote percentage was?
We barely missed it,
54.
54,
and we needed
It's not
what?
that far.
60.
60.
60 plus
Gotta have
one.
some-
Nope, just
Just
60.
60?
Unless the legislature changes something.
no,
You never can tell that. what's gonna
Probably not
happen.
gonna happen. People have been trying for a while. But 60%, so only 6%.
So back to Pete, some of the things that you said, I think I wanna say, if we were to have a community facility discussion, it doesn't just need to be a discussion that we're like throwing a bunch of ideas out there for the community. We also need to have a staff and admin special section, I think, because their realities and needs are different as well. And, we need to get their buy-in. A lot of times their buy-in, I think, is the bigger key to a community buy-in,
Absolutely.
because they talk.
Absolutely.
Friends, family, neighbors, their votes count.
If you have
way
staff
more than
support,
just one.
you're,
But
It'll be way easier.
don't we have that request already? Isn't that the last committee we had, where we had, was comprised of teachers and every school had their wants?
Right, but
There
I'm saying if
was,
we went to and did a community forum
No,
or
I agree.
whatever,
I agree,
but we
but
need to have that.
We have
component
had
as well.
something to where
Yeah,
their
the last
participation was there.
Right.
Mhm.
It was,
Yeah.
it was some.
There-
But
comprised of-
are they here, are they thinking that we're still hearing them and that their list is what would be included in our bond?
I hear you.
And maybe they don't feel that way.
the last work that was done and the data that was collected was focused on sporadic work at each of the schools, adding space, you know, here, and here. So if you're going a different direction where you're building space to alleviate the overcrowding, it's just a different dynamic, so that's probably the way you wanna posture, is say, in lieu of trying to add space and put additional pressure on the core space of each of those facilities, the alternative idea is to build new K-6 space to alleviate the overcrowding in that manner, which is the more optimal strategy from my perspective, is to, and you are looking at probably a 2024 complete. If you passed a bond for the high school in November or late date February 2021, you're still probably conservatively looking at a 2024 occupancy fall.
For the high school.
Yeah, and then if you added a K-6 into that, just quickly looking at it, you would run probably a chase. So when you're done with the design of the high school and bid it, you'd launch into the K-6 design and try and bid it about a year later, as soon as you as soon as you get a funding release letter in the July year of your bid of the high school, look to bid the K-6. You know, you'd wanna bid the high school front funded early, you know, a year or so later. You know, that's a pretty accelerated pace, but could be done. And then the same with the K-6, so probably a 2024 for the high school, 2025 for the K-6. So that gives you kind of a perspective on when you would realize the relief. And
Could be good on construction bids as well, potentially with contractors, just because if you have big projects going on already, they'll look more keenly and you might get some more competitive bids because you already have a contractor on site for another project.
Right. And with the model, you'd have the opportunity to bid it early in the year and get through all your contracts, you know, submittals, start procurement, mobilize the site as the weather's getting turning, and that's optimal. So from my side, I could polish up the 65, I'll ignore the 91 for now, and try and look at the program that made up the 91 and look at pieces that would come out of that, like the auditorium and the square footage associated with that, and what the 65 translated or translates to based on the programming that was done many years ago. But I think it, you know, less specifics, it still applies, you know. So if it's a competition gym and locker rooms and classrooms and admin space and a relocation of where the admin would be, etc., and potentially need to look a little bit, because there was, when we laid it out, the addition in there, it's budgeted right now straight up build new space, but the reality is you start to, you know, blend that with the existing building, there'll probably be some modernization, so probably some budget in there for that too, to at least complement and tie into the existing building, but avoid doing things within the building knowing that that's gonna be eligible, you know, down the road, and not too many years down, 2029, when that would need modernization, and come back with that and say, well, here's what the program looks like, does that seem appropriate? And then that's something you probably share with your teachers and staff at the high school, and on the K-6 level where they're overcrowded, take a look at, if you go backwards from 50 million, what does that translate to K-6 wise, and what kind of classrooms is that gonna generate, and what does that do across the K-6 schools, you know, for, you know, what will it translate to their relief, you know, space wise. So that may be a good place to start, and and sharing that with the community. I would try and keep it focused on that, and if it goes a different direction, you go that direction, but that's where, you know, the high school's where your eligibility is, it's a definite need, you know, you need to build that new space to house your students. The work we did previously, and I know the district did a tremendous amount of work, you know, looking at what needed to happen at those schools to keep them viable, even though it was pushing the core space in the last one. But a lot of that need was identified then, it's just, instead of being on multiple campuses, it would be on one. That makes sense? See what that looks like, and probably the next step. The only other anomaly, and I'm sorry I was late, but I missed the K3 class reduction portion of it. I know you need to begin some sort of design process, whether it's modulars or portables or stick-built, but could someone give me just a quick, is that something that, if you're building new space, that's probably gonna need to be supported by bond, but that would probably bring your K6 back to a point where it starts becoming not really a viable facility if you build the core space size to support.
Yeah, we would, the guidance from OSDI is just design phase, so very loose terms, but like, basically we need to be spending money, working towards what we're gonna be doing. And so if we're gonna phase it in, that's gonna kinda complicate things a little bit. I mean, we can do, like Greg was saying, we can do some of that work and start looking at architecture drawings and stuff like that, but we need to be steadfast, we can't like drag it on, we gotta keep
Could
trying.
that money be used for land purchase for a K-6 school?
No, I don't believe
No.
so.
Okay, this would be for the
Literally
building
just
of,
building the building, what
Okay.
it takes to build the building.
Somehow producing the 10 classrooms
They want 10
Yes.
classrooms for the K6.
and some.
K3,
K3.
sorry, K3.
Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your time tonight. Jax, appreciate the information. Pete, Jeanette, district staff, thank you very much for the information. Board, great discussion. We still have a lot on our plate, but appreciate the time you guys, the time we took out tonight to do this. We will now have a recess. The board will go into an executive session for 30 minutes to consider the selection of a site or the acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase. 30 minutes, we'll take 2 or 3 minutes to go to the restroom, and we will reconvene in Chris's office. Thank you.